on the same side. Um, Before we begin, just a couple of announcements. I kindly request everyone to please keep their mobiles on silent or vibrate only mode. And the first session will begin shortly, and we will go straight into the second session without a break. So I'll request you all after the first session to stay seated. We have a distinguished panel of speakers today to start these proceedings. I'd like to introduce our inaugural panel and invite them first to join us on the stage and then for the lighting of the lamp. Briefly, and I know all of us who are here in this room today know this, that lighting of the lamp is a deep cultural significance. That it has a deep cultural and symbolic significance. Not only is it the traditional way to inaugurate momentous events and invoke divine blessings in most occasions, but most importantly, I think it symbolizes the triumph of knowledge over ignorance, hope over despair, light over darkness, and essentially inviting positive energies to occasions like these. I believe we are waiting just for a minute or two for Secretary to arrive, and I will join you back in just a moment. In the meantime, I also wanted to say we have a couple of our team members here. If anyone needs any assistance, there is Ayushi and Achit. If there is any assistance required, especially ma'am or anyone with technical assistance or anything, they're here to help you. Just convenience.
Yes. I've also been in touch with him. In fact, when he was Shinidi Misha. In fact, we met on the 4th of died on a lift accident in a mine. You know. But apparently 3 other people, they're 14. This way 3 are critical now.
Once again, welcome to our inaugural session. It's my pleasure to introduce and invite our distinguished panel for the first session. We have with us today Shri Ashwini Kumar, who is the officer from the Indian Economic Service and is currently the economic advisor to the Ministry of Steel. Shri Kumar will provide a brief overview of the context and purpose of the workshop and welcome our other two esteemed panelists for the day's first session. Welcome, Shri Kumar. We are also privileged to have with us today Srimati Leena Nandan, Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, Government of India, as the guest of honor, who will share her valuable thoughts, I'm sure, on the importance of preserving our ecology and how it relates to the more specific goals under discussion today. Srimati Nandan is an IAS officer of the 1987 batch from the Uttar Pradesh cadre. She is a graduate in English honors from Patna Women's College, Patna University, and has done her master's in development management from the Asian Institute of Management in Manila. Srimati Leena Nandan has served in various capacities in the state and central governments as district magistrate in 4 districts, managing director, Uttar Pradesh Tourism Corporation, and joint secretary, Ministry of Tourism, to name a few. She was posted in the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways as Joint Secretary in 2016 and continued there as Additional Secretary and then later Special Secretary up to 2020. Srimati Nandan assumed charge as Secretary in the Department of Consumer Affairs in May 2020 before taking over in her current position as Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in January 2022. A very special welcome to you, ma'am. Last but definitely not the least, we are delighted to have with us Shri Nagendranath Sinha, who is currently Secretary, Ministry of Steel, Government of India, as the chief guest for today, who will deliver a special address where he will share his insights on the various topics that we are all here to discuss during this important workshop. Shri Nagendranath Sinha is a Jharkhand cadre officer from the batch of 1987 of the Indian Administrative Service.
And with that, there is a bigger problem, and that problem is how to improve the carbon footprint of steel sector. Steel is considered to be hard to abate sector, and if we look at India's commitment of larger climate goals in international fora, which were kind of outlined at COP26, we have set an ambitious target of reducing our carbon intensity of our economy by 45% by 2030 and achieving a net zero by 2070. Steel sector's decarbonization and sustainable development is a crucial spoke in the wheel when we talk of achieving our ambitious climate goals, and sustainable transition of steel sector is extremely important as we go along in expanding our steel production capacity and also how to improve the carbon footprint of our existing steel production facilities. If we look at present scenario, India's steel sector's emission intensity is estimated at around 2.5 tons CO2 equivalent per ton of steel, which is much higher than the global average of 1.85 tons CO2 equivalent per ton of steel. So there is a big room of improvement and catching up to do with global standards in this thing. And now, with some countries coming up their environmental laws, which essentially are trade restrictions, there is a greater sense of urgency in reducing emission intensity of India's steel sector. All the steel companies are mindful of that, and they are taking several initiatives also to this end. So in this context, Minister of Steel is organizing this national workshop on forging sustainability in steel, which tries to bring together steel companies, experts of financial sectors, experts of other domains, which kind of bring tools to improve sustainability of steel sector at large. And this is a multi-stakeholder engagement that we have put together for the day. After this introductory session, we have 3 thematic sessions. The first thematic session looks at some useful tools for decision making. For example, one of the key questions is how to achieve this decarbonization in the least cost way. And standard theory says marginal abatement cost is a tool which we should look at, but there is no ready-to-use toolkit available to apply marginal abatement cost in practice. So this session also provides a glimpse of marginal abatement cost curve toolkit developed within Ministry of Steel. This session also covers the initiatives of Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the use of artificial intelligence, and some other related topics. The second session is very important, where it's more of a peer learning session, where Indian steel companies which have undertaken several initiatives to improve their carbon footprint, they talk about their experiences and they share their case studies with all the audience present here. This is going to be a very important session when it comes to learning from experiences of other industries. The third thematic session brings together speakers from a variety of financial institutions, multilateral development banks, public and private sector FIs, to share their ideas on how to mobilize finance for the massive investment requirements to undertake decarbonization projects in steel sector. Though we don't have any kind of authentic estimate of investment requirement in steel sector, but if we look at how capital intensive the steel sector is, this number is going to be an astronomical number for all you know. So we have put together a number of good speakers in these three sessions and very practical, useful sessions. I look forward to listen to all of them, and I expect that this workshop is going to be very useful for all the steel companies and other stakeholders present here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shri Kumar. Now, may I please invite Srimati Nandan to address the audience and make points to start us off for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Shri N. Sinha, Secretary Steel, Shri Ashwini Kumar, Economic Advisor, Srimati Sukriti Lekhi, AS and FA, representatives from the Ministry, from the private and public sector, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be here today in this workshop on forging sustainability in steel. And this could not have come at a more opportune time, given the fact that we have not only as a country updated our nationally determined contributions and therefore declared to the world our ambitious targets for 2030, which, by the way, we are well on track to achieving, because we've already achieved reduction in the emission intensity of the economy by 33% as on 2019, which was slated to be achieved in 2030. But being a very responsible country, being a country that is very cognizant of the fact that India, as a developing country, has done nothing to contribute to the current status of emissions and its impact, concomitant impact on climate change. Recognizing that, but yet being very responsible and responsive, India has gone ahead to declare ambitious targets where, along with growth, the environmental aspects have also been taken into account by our continued focus on sustainability. And therefore, our updated NDC targets for 2030 envisage that 50% of our energy will be from non-fossil fuel sources of energy and of power, and the emission intensity of the economy would decrease by 45%. And therefore, it is all the more imperative that we discuss, and not only discuss ideas and not only exchange views, but also bring these ideas to fruition, bring to the ground collaborative efforts. And this, therefore, the discussions that are going to happen in the next 3 sessions are going to be extremely relevant. And in that context, I would also like to highlight the fact that the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, not only spearheading the country's position with respect to the global perspective on climate change, has also taken forward initiatives so that we are able to achieve what we've set out to do in the spirit of collaboration, using best practices, technical know-how, and in fact, leveraging the financial mobilization that is bound to flow, given the fact that world over there are such increasing concerns about the impact of our economic activities on climate change and therefore on the future of the planet in general. And that is the point that I would particularly like to emphasize. Our responsibility and our mandate cannot only be driven from extraneous considerations such as the increasing view of consumers, be they industrial consumers, institutional consumers, or individual consumers, for green steel. It has to be driven from within. It has to be driven from a sense of responsibility that we at this point of time are the guardians for the future generations. We are trustees of the planet, and if we do not stop a moment and look at and introspect on what we have done so far and what is it that we in our individual and collective spheres can do to tackle this increasing problem of climate change, we would have failed our duty to the future generations. That is the point at which we are today. And I hope that it is in this spirit that the discussions in the ensuing 3 sessions are going to take place, which, to reiterate the point I have made, is not that it is going to be only a response to the demand for change in the way we conduct our economic activities in terms of producing steel, but also a change that is driven from our own internal appreciation of the fact that increasing freak weather events the world over are pointing out to us that we cannot take the earth for granted. We cannot take the planet for granted. And in the spirit of one world, one family, one future, that is the international collaboration that we from the ministry have tried to take forward through the Lead Industry Transition Initiative that was launched by India and Sweden jointly in 2019 and has been taken forward last year at COP into Lead Industry Transition 2.0. And that is something that I do hope, and I'm sure that the discussions will dwell and shed more light on it, into having meaningful collaborations under the Industry Transition Partnership. Because this is a partnership that includes a number of countries, spans a range of companies, and therefore this discussion and these exchange of best practices cannot remain confined to just sharing of documents and improving our intellectual understanding of how we can bring in more sustainability. It has to translate to action on the ground. So the time for talk is now to move towards action. During the G20 last year, the ministry had taken up 3 very important themes because we were spearheading the discussions on environment and climate sustainability. So we looked at water security, we looked at how we can reclaim old abandoned mines and restore the biodiversity, because this is the biodiversity which, unless it is brought back to its original situation, is going to have its negative impact. Therefore, the mines from which we continue to extract our ores, how do we reclaim those mines? How do we bring back and restore the biodiversity? This is an area of great importance, and that is why we had some very meaningful discussions in the course of the G20. The second theme that we took up was on circularity, circular economy and resource efficiency. And I'm very happy to share with this audience, and I'm sure a lot of you would be aware of this already, that under the Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency Industry Coalition, we already have some more than 40 companies from 11 countries that are participants. And circularity is something that we have focused on for the steel sector in particular in the course of G20. And we had released a document on that occasion, and I hope and I'm sure that whatever were the discussions that took place during our G20 deliberations, they would be getting taken forward by the industry representatives who are here today. Because circularity, use of recycled steel, is something that all of you, being domain experts, would be more than aware of. Therefore, how do we bring this circularity? How does the vehicle scrapping policy of the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways ensure that more and more registered vehicle scrapping facilities are available to produce this recycled steel and make it available to the industry that can increase the use of recycled steel in its steel outputs? So this is another area that we would like more and more focus on, because circularity is going to be a part of the industry transition. The third thing that I would like to emphasize is the fact that the processes, the input for the steel industry as well as the process of steel making, both of them, as has already been mentioned by Ashwini in his opening remarks, both of them entail considerable amount of emissions. And we are all cognizant of that fact, and that is why we are all here today. So, the Ministry of Environment, when we have selected sectors where we will allow international carbon credits to be taken to the other countries and not adjusted against our NTCs, among those sectors, there are two very important sectors that have a bearing on our discussions. One is green hydrogen, one is carbon capture, utilization and storage. Which means that if collaborations are brought in by international companies, we as the ministry, because there is a nationally designated authority, there's a committee which is chaired by the Ministry of Environment, that authority allows carbon credits to be traded internationally. And there are certain sectors only where we are going to allow these credits to be traded, because we are also conscious of the fact that, as I mentioned, we have our own NDCs and we have to look at being able to fulfill the targets that we have updated as late as 2022. But in the sectors where it is very important to bring in abatement, where it is very important to bring in international research and development and to bring in international investment, those are the sectors where we would allow the carbon credits to be traded overseas. And therefore, green hydrogen and use of green hydrogen, production of green hydrogen is an area that we have consciously included, as well as CCUS, as I have just mentioned. In the last few months, there have been some encouraging and several encouraging developments in terms of use of green hydrogen, but how this is going to be scaled up, how the cost aspects are going to be met. And I think the forthcoming sessions would also shed light on the cost curve. And then there is also going to be discussion on the financing, because ultimately the nuts and bolts boil down to not only the technical and research-based technology, best available technology that is there for utilization, but also financing this, making it possible to use that technology. So all these are going to be very critical issues. And I need not emphasize the importance that the steel sector has for our country, not only in terms of manufacturing being a very key aspect of the economy, but also the fact that steel itself plays a humongous role in the development of infrastructure. And for a growing country, for a country that is moving very fast to meet the growth aspirations of its 1.4 billion population, this is the time when we bring in more and more sustainability, so that the steel that we use is actually going to be the steel of tomorrow. And that is why our discussions today have such an important bearing on the entire sectoral implications for use of steel in the infrastructure, for the role that steel plays in manufacturing and therefore in the GDP. And I would exhort all those who are present here today to participate in the discussions in the spirit of taking forward the outcomes and the recommendations, so that when we come back to the drawing board, when we revisit what were the outcomes of today's workshop, we can be satisfied that indeed we have set out on the path that we had promised ourselves and that we had promised to the nation. Thank you and wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much, Srimati Nandan. May I please now invite Sri Nagendranath Sinha to make his inaugural comments.
Srimati Leena Nandan, Secretary, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Shri Ashwini Kumar, Srimati Sukriti Lekhi, Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor, Shri Amendu Prakash, colleagues from the Ministry, CPSCs of the Ministry, private sector, think tanks, experts. Thank you very much for joining in such large numbers. One concern that Ashwini had, whether we'll run out of the space. Thankfully, we still have some space available within the room. This is a very important deliberation, and it kind of continues the dialogue that the ministry is having along with ministries like Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Niti Aayog, and such bodies on the issue of the sustainability of the steel sector. And we need not dwell much on the issue of the worsening climate situation. I was reading a report of the National Oceanic Administration of the United States, and it mentioned that we are 1.3 degree above the 20th century average, and if one takes it, measures it with respect to the pre-industrial era, the temperature rise may be slightly more. It also mentioned that there is 61% possibility that it is one of the warmest years, the warmest year in the recorded history. In fact, April 2024 was the warmest month globally ever in the recorded era. So there is a significant possibility that we are kind of hurtling ourselves towards the climate disaster, if not other forms of disasters that we come to know of from the various development taking place nationally, internationally, everywhere. India, though it has one of the lowest per capita emissions throughout, but if one takes it globally as the current level of emission, we are one of the third largest emitter among the community of nations. So for us, even though we are per capita wise one of the lowest emitters, but in terms of the kind of responsibility that should generate from within, and that has also been emphasized and underlined by our political leadership led by Honorable Prime Minister, that call should come from within and has come from within, and that is why we have laid targets which are much above that we had committed initially, and that was mentioned by Leena ji in course of her speech. The India, as all of us are aware, and all of us are to a very significant extent participants in the growth story, and as has been emphasized by leadership at various fora and various occasions, is that we need to move to a era of into the course of this Amrit Kal by 2047, whereby we become a developed country. Our economy, per capita income, etc., attains the level that is currently recognized as one bracketing the country and the population within that range of about $20,000 per capita per annum. So, I mean, if you compare that with our current level of economy, so that's we are currently standing at about $4 trillion per capita. So, if we get to that level, it becomes kind of 8 times more. So, even if we reduce our carbon emission intensity very significantly, as was mentioned by Leena ji, that we intend to bring it down by 45% from the 2005 levels, and we continue our efforts in this direction. The carbon emission that we will be having is something which is going to be quite large, but the metal consumption will also keep on rising, and there are two facts that I want to mention in this regard. One is the general observed elasticity of demand, and we see that there is this elasticity of about 1.2 vis-a-vis the economic growth. And so, if to take an example, if there is a 5% growth of the economy, so the steel demand should grow something like by 6%. But then there's this factor as well. As we move more into the new economy, which is underlined by renewables, electric vehicles, batteries, and all of that, the consumption of metal goes up. That's a fact underlined by all observers across the world. In fact, I was reading a report by KPMG before coming for this meeting, and they said that 20% of the copper demand, additional copper demand, is more likely to come from India, and similarly, aluminium, steel, etc. Demand will continue to go up. Now, the challenge before the entire sector is how do we, even while our demand goes up, our emission is not running away. That's the challenge that we face, because not only number of units goes up, but also the fact that our baseline is also at a comparatively higher level, as was mentioned by Ashwini, that our current per ton crude steel emission is 25% more than what it is worldwide, and it's not that everyone is emitting just for the sake of emitting, but we suffer from some handicaps that all of us should know and should I'm sure reasonably aware of. One, we don't have natural gas, or natural gases prices on account of that are significantly higher. So that's one. Two, the availability of iron ore itself is not of a grade which lends itself to the DRI. So a lot of beneficiation is required. In fact, that is one request which we have made to Linaji, is that we should orient our policies in a manner in which the beneficiation of low-grade iron ore is encouraged. So there is a task force of this ministry, Ministry of Mines, and yours, where we are looking at these policies, so that taken together the beneficiation of low-grade iron ore is encouraged. And the third factor is availability of scrap. Our own generation of scrap is only to the extent of about 20 to 25 million tons, and therefore the use in steel making is it's also standing between 20 to 25%, because some scrap is imported from outside. But if you see countries, many countries in Middle East, many countries in Europe or America, the number ranges something like 2/3 to I believe in Iran it ranges to about 85% or so. So and it's also because of the historical factors, because the steel consumption in this country was low, and if you take just average thing, it takes about 40 years for steel to get to a stage where it could be used as scrap. Now, because of policies like the EPR for the auto sector that you are proposing to bring, the age of the sectors, user sectors like the auto, etc., will come down, while in industrial sectors, construction, etc., it will continue to be high. So we haven't used much steel in the past, so therefore availability of scrap is low. So there is only so much that we can do in this regard. So, on the one hand, we suffer from some handicaps. Our carbon emission levels are higher as compared to the global levels. We intend to achieve a much higher level of use of steel on account of the increasing prosperity for the economy, for its citizenship. Yet we have to be responsible and therefore bring down the carbon emission significantly, and therefore it's a huge agenda that needs to be traversed on this account. Uh, uh, mm, the point that I wish to bring to people in this house is that while the agenda is large, if one focuses on what one can do, the agenda is handleable. 90% of the emissions in course of steel making comes from the scope 1, that is within the gates of the factory. It's true that some will come from scope 2, that is in course of generation of electricity, and scope 3, the upstream. So lot of it, in fact, most of it is what we can handle, and therefore we have to get to a stage where we not only from the nudge from the ministry, nudge from the people like Abhay, but from within the voices should generate that as trustees of the earth, we need to work towards bringing emission down and increasing or moving forward on the path of the sustainability as much as possible. Ministry, as has been mentioned, we have constituted 14 task forces that looked at different aspects of how do we make movement towards decarbonization of the steel. We don't talk about green steel. I mean, that's a because green steel, as is commonly perceived in many parts of the world, is steel without carbon emission. That is a utopian dream. But our goal is to move towards as much reduction of carbon emission in steel making as possible, and that is certainly a realizable and achievable goal, and that we should move towards it. These 14 task forces look at different issues like how do we bring the energy efficiency by employing best available technology, how do we use the renewable energy, how do we prepare our charge or inputs in a manner in which the emission reduction is brought about. We'll also look at the use of green hydrogen and carbon capture, utilization and storage. But these are things into future, because a lot of technology is yet to be developed. But the ministry, along with the support of various stakeholders, ministries, we are moving towards that, and we are in fact aligned with the interests of the stakeholders from the industry, from the user community, and from the overall environment. So it's a group, it's a consideration, it's a thinking which is taking everyone together and aligning itself with the national interest and national goals. The another area that was mentioned by Leena ji related to the water consumption, and water consumption levels for our steel making is higher as compared to many other countries, many other economies, and it stands at about 3.2 kiloliter per ton of steel made, and efforts should be made to bring down this in course of steel making, and I'm told that companies like Tata Steel intend to bring it down to about 1.5 kiloliter per ton of crude steel. JSW intends to bring down it to about 2.2 kiloliter per ton of crude steel. So that is one area that we should continue to work, and there is indeed a possibility of working towards it as we go. There is a brilliant thing that has been introduced by SEBI, is sustainability reporting. So I suggest that we take this sustainability reporting very seriously, and not only we should report what we are doing currently in order to improve our sustainability profile, but also we should lay down our goals for the sustainability for a medium term, say 2029 or 2030, and each one of the companies who are listed on the boards or otherwise, they should generate their sustainability plans. And I will suggest to Leena ji that she may also encourage CPCB and state pollution control boards to also encourage companies to kind of provide their sustainability goals in the medium term, and indeed ask them to work towards it. Waste generation is generation, and its handling is another area that we should continue to work, because a lot of useful minerals minerals and raw materials are there in the waste, and that steel companies are indeed doing that. In fact, one of the projects that the ministry is handling is use of the slag, particularly the steel slag, into two forms. One in the road making as aggregates, and another is in terms of soil modifier for the agriculture. So these two projects are almost coming to a close, and we will be releasing its results quickly. Today, the principal theme is, of course, the forging sustainability in steel, and as was mentioned by Aswini, that three thematic discussions would take place. One is the discussion on the tools that encourage the companies towards measuring their own levels of carbon emission and other factors. And one of the tools that will be unveiled during this workshop is the marginal abatement cost of carbon. It's a Excel-based tool, but more would be mentioned in that session. But it has databases with regard to the processes, the raw materials, and the carbon embedded into that. And so any company can, while selecting a process, decide and determine as to what will be the emission profile, and therefore and the saving that it can generate by using a particular process or shifting to a particular process. So through this tool, one can prioritize different kind of emission reducing technologies and processes and choices. So it's a great prioritization tool. It can certainly be improved. It's a first attempt, and it can certainly be improved, and suggestions would indeed be welcome. The important point to be noted in this regard is that while we collect data, but we also seek data from the suppliers of the companies, that is, say, for example, blast furnace. So not all blast furnace emission data is to some extent calculatable from the carbon emission from its top, but there are other processes in which the emission data is supplied by these suppliers. So rather than going by the global averages, we should get good quality data from the suppliers. And this also becomes an important point when we are moving towards an era of the the developments that are taking place worldwide, like CBAM, that is coming in Europe, and its counterpart that is being proposed in UK, and similar developments that will be happening elsewhere. So there, if we do not capture data with regard to the emission intensity, then the global data will be used, and that will be disadvantaging all our producers. So it is important for us to get data specific to our processes of our machines, and for every installation rather than the company as a whole, and keep this data, and therefore to get the data and to maintain the data in a manner in which they could be subject to further processing while you are making filings under when you are exporting to these territories. Even otherwise, it is important because in order to file your information to regulators like BEE, you need to know as to what your facility-wise emission is like. So data management and storage is quite important for the companies. One concern, of course, is there that many of the large companies are in a position to do so, but what of the companies in the secondary sector which are not so large, which do not have very large departments like which are handling sustainability, resource efficiency, and all of that. So there, the role of the ministry, bodies like BEE, and the association becomes important, and we should encourage them through various sensitization seminars, development of agencies which help companies to chart their path towards decarbonization and emission reduction and sustainability. So that's the way in which we should move forward. Today, when we look at the entire scenario, the inescapable conclusion is that this sector would grow, but this growth will come with a lot of responsibility. In order to handle and discharge that responsibility, we need to be extremely concerned about that. There are multiple pathways. Some of the pathways which the companies will choose will have least cost, but whereas some will have some cost, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that because of the Energy Conservation Act, one day carbon price will come to bite us, and therefore while today we cannot take that into account, but in future those will be part of our cost calculations and our sustainability decisions. We need to be cognizant of that. We need to be very concerned about what we throw out or leave out as waste, because and we need to employ the best available technologies, and we all need to work together to work in the areas where there is a lot of technological development that needs to be done. In fact, you will be very happy, Linaji, to know that the ministry is working with a consortium to handle this issue of green hydrogen based DRI making, where the iron will be directly reduced with 100% hydrogen. That technology is available with people abroad at a pilot level, but at a very high cost. So for us, the cost is important, and that we not only need to master that technology, but also ensure that that technology comes at a price at which our industry can adopt that And this we can only do if all of us unite and work in a consortium mode, as has been done by companies and countries in many instances. So I wish this very important workshop a success, and hopefully there would be a lot of learnings, and there would be a lot of action points to take forward from this workshop. Thank you very much. And good day.
Thank you, Sri Sinha. I'd like to extend a warmest thank you to our guest of honor, Srimati Leena Nandan, and for her address, and our chief guest, Sri Nagendranath Sinha, for his special address, and to Sri Ashwini Kumar for setting the context for the deliberations today. Thanks to all of you for a befitting introduction, I'd say, and also for convincingly exhorting us towards working towards a more responsible attitude towards growth and the protection of our planet. And I think you made that point to kick this off beautifully today. Thank you so much. I'd like to now request Shri Amarendra Prakash, Chairman, Steel Authority of India Limited, to present a bouquet to Srimati Nandan. And to Sri Sinha. Thank you so much, everyone, again. Before we head into the next session, may I please request... Yes. Before we head into the next session, may I please request... may I please request Sri Sinha to present a small memento of our appreciation to Srimati Nandan. Thank you, Sri Sinha. May I please request Sri Kumar to present a small memento to Sri Sinha. And in return, may I please request you, sir, Sri Sinha, to present a small memento to Sri Kumar. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Prakash. Before we head into these I request you all to stay seated. We are running a little behind schedule, but we will go into the next session immediately. Before I invite my next panel, I just wanted to sum up the discussion, the comments made in the first session to link it to our next one. And may I please request everyone to take their seats? Getting to the next session, I just wanted to summarize a little what was said and mentioned in our inaugural session to set the context and to get our next session underway. I think starting from Mr. Kumar, he talked about improving the carbon footprint of the steel sector. and how everyone mentioned a sense of urgency when it comes to um, actually looking at best practices, looking at essential changes that are required for more sustainable development. And I think all of you will agree in the last month that we've had extreme weather events. We've had floods in Dubai, we've had a dust storm in Mumbai, and we have had strange, of course, events and fabulous visions in places like London and elsewhere. And I think that is why a lot of the emphasis on sustainability, on the effects of climate change, as well as the spirit of collaboration that all our speakers talked about, is something why we have everyone here today. And now I'd like to invite our next session speakers. First, please invite our chair for the next session, Shri Abhay Bhakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. May I now invite Dr. Sanjay Roy, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Steel, to join us on the stage. Next, I'd like to invite Professor Atul Kumar from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I'd like to invite Ayush Raj Sinha from the Ministry of Steel. He's a young professional in the Ministry of Steel. I'd also like to invite Mr. E. Nandagopal, Director, Grant Thornton, Bharat. I'd also invite Sri R.K. Paul, Director, NISST. And Sri Pranav Sarkar, Sector Expert at the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our panelists. With your permission, sirs, may I do the introduction, or may we do away with that because we are behind schedule?
We will
This is
start.
completely at your
We can
discretion.
start.
We can start.
Thank you so much. Over to you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. And without waiting for any formality, let's start this session very quickly. I am Abhay Bhakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. In the morning, you have seen Secretary Steel and Secretary Environment mentioned about the carbon market and, of course, the various strategies on reducing energy consumption in the steel sector, which also leads to not only the cost saving for producing steel, but also the reducing emissions. So the energy efficiency, which is actually a bottom-up approach, and it is also now considered as one of the least cost strategy or tool for reducing emissions. So whatever kinds of technologies you would like to implement or interventions you want to do in any sector, even in case of hard-to-abate sectors like steel, cement, etc., the energy efficiency approach will always give you the least cost solution. So it is also considered as a first fuel, or you can say a low-hanging fruit. Steel sector in India has already reaped the benefit through PAT scheme of Bureau and many other interventions. They have already saved more than 5 million ton of oil equivalent, or almost 20 million tons of CO2 reduction in past decade. So today's this session pertaining to the marginal abatement cost curves, it's really important in terms of our future approach, not only meeting our NDC targets by 2030, but beyond our whatever long-term goals of 2047 or 2070. I think the green steel approach, as Secretary Steel mentioned in the morning about 14 task force, the bottom line was that first reduce the energy and then try to switch your fuel to a greener one. So in this regard, the cost of any such intervention comes into discussion. So I'll only highlight 2 points before I invite my co-chair and also the panelist here. That first thing is that when we reduce the emissions through deployment of any technology, whether it's energy efficiency or the second, any fuel switch technology. So for new technology, depending on the additional energy saving or emission reduction, you have an additional cost. Now, how much that additional cost will actually give the internal return, both in terms of energy cost and the emission reduction? That's one aspect which has to be always decided by the board, decided by the policy makers or the corporate themselves. The second thing is, this marginal cost can be supported by a carbon financing instrument, and we call it the carbon market. It's one of the now the emerging area, as mentioned in the Energy Conservation Act amendment. So the carbon market will actually facilitate that marginal cost to some extent. How much it is available, it depends on the technology, it depends on your existing technology, because you are going to replace with the existing or the old one to a new one or the emerging. So that differential will, or the delta will actually decide how much you are going to get the carbon credits and how much the cost can be fulfilled, or the gap can be fulfilled. So these are the 2 points which I think will be further elaborated through detailed presentations here. I invite all my fellow panelists here and look forward for discussion. Before that, let me hand over to my co-chair, Dr. Sanjeev Rai. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. You have, in fact, set the context for this meeting. I will not take much time, although we are running short of time. I'd only like to say one thing, that we'll request Professor Atul Kumar to give us a detail about the abatement cost. What we know from abatement cost is something that a cost intervention that will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by at least 1 ton. So beyond that, the marginal abatement cost curve, this is a technological tool which can assess the needs, what will be required to bring down the carbon emission, and which will be the best possible mechanism in the policy to be employed by either the government or the company itself to reduce the carbon footprint of the company. So the sustainable future is what we are all talking about. The global economy requires us to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce from our Indian perspective, in the steel sector in perspective, from 2.5 ton to somewhere much below 1.9 ton, which is the global standard now. But the global standard will continue to have a lower dip with the coming days, and with the policy changes across the globe, we are in for a system where we have to work towards not greening but decarbonizing our systems. Green, a concept of green, as sir had said, what is green steel we cannot define, but we have to decarbonize our steel sector to bring it to the best possible standards. So we have to, we have to invest in clean energy, we have to be more efficient, we have to avoid processes, and we have to be continuing upgrading ourselves to have the best possible tools for this. So I will request Professor Atul Kumar to give us an introduction on the margin.
Where I can see, is it visible here? Can you display? Yes. Good morning. Thanks, Chair, Co-Chair, and fellow panelist, distinguished guest from industry. I'll be talking about a brief about the marginal abatement cost curve. I understand there is a technical presentation on this particular tool, but I'm more talking from the theoretical perspective. So, if we deploy any technology, particularly the intervention, 3 broad things one look into, and always first criteria is the cost effectiveness. the assessment of the cost relative to the emission reduction potential. Second is the technological maturity, whether technology is available, service, repair part are available or not, local is available or not. Third is the scalability, whether it can be upscaled to the certain level and it is sustainable at that level, whether we have the resources, space required for that scalability is there or not. Let me clear here, within the marginal abatement cost, look only on the first aspect. But while you implement your strategy, you should take into these two aspects, which is very, very important here. So what I'll say, that is, marginal abatement tool is a tool, not the tool. That should be kept in mind while doing so. Marginal abatement cost built on unit cost of abatement, unit cost of mitigation on adaptation. By definition, it says that is cost associated with reducing 1 ton of CO2 emission, rupees per ton or dollar per ton. This unit is here CO2 emission, rupees or currency, whatever you are talking. This is done through the economic analysis. It helps you to prioritize which is your least cost option among variety of options, so it gives you the idea which one should be chosen first. It has a unique advantage, that it is comparability. Comparability for the carbon reducing strategy. So which particular option is lowest cost? In fact, when we talk about carbon mitigation, we talk about no regret option. The option which are financially beneficial. Particularly when we talk about energy efficiency option, they don't only reduce your CO2 emission, but they also do the fuel saving and resulting into the what we call the negative cost of abatement. So you have not the additional cost, but benefit is there. How do we calculate net cost of mitigation effort? As I said, why net we are using in certain option, particularly most of the energy efficiency option, you will have net cost divided by total GHG emission reduced. I am not talking, what does cost component include? It includes your investment cost, your repair and maintenance cost, your fuel cost, and then you have baseline technology, you have mitigation technology. These are compared, of course they are done at the life cycle basis. So you do that for the entire life cycle, use the discount factor, and then calculate on the basis of this what is the unit cost of abatement. There are factors affect, so particularly these costs vary from location to location, place to place, depending on your labor and material cost. So one can usually argue, if these marginal abatement cost curve are available in the literature for other part of the world, can we adopt that? Methodologically, we can adopt, but for the number value, it cannot be adopted. Since cost component is entirely localized, so one need take into cognizance of that fact. How it looks? There are 3 components. This is a tool usually very commonly used in what we call the environmental economics to estimate the unit cost of pollutant reduction. It is invented initially for the GHG mitigation. In fact, if you see the literature, when there was in the project of the Asia least cost mitigation effort in 1998, 90s, that time also these tools were used. Now, these tools are extended beyond to the CO2 emission. So if there are issues related to the reduction of local air pollutant, these tools can be used for that. But of course, then your denominator will not be the GHG mitigation. It would be that particular air pollutant when you are talking about. Good thing about this tool is it's very good visual representation. That's what is the beauty of, particularly for the decision maker, higher decision maker who may not want to go to the nitty-gritty of these things. It gives you a very visual appreciation, snapshot. It's a graphical from negative side to positive, represent both cost and reduction potential on that side. Adaptation and to the various, as I mentioned, that is not limited to the GHG, you can do that for the CO2 emission. In fact, one can, other than the air pollutant, one can do these analysis also for the water reduction or material reduction kind of a strategy. These are used in different sector. I can give you the example in the renewable, energy efficiency, across sector or within the economy, you can also do these kind of things. How does it looks? There is what we call the x-axis and y-axis. In y-axis, y-axis we plot the cost of reduction, unit cost of reduction. So you will have also on the negative side, where per unit of reducing of the GHG emission, you are saving money. And then you have on the positive side, and these are the each option. Y-axis we have cost, x-axis we have also for the each option, what is the potential of the reduction. This has a very scalability. You can do this at your process level, you can do at the sector level, entire steel industry, or you can do at the entire energy sector or economy wide, also doing for the non-energy sector also. And very good tool, I'll say in that terms, for the visual appreciation for decision making. This has a inverted curve characteristic. So you plot these options from starting from the negative lower side, most negative side, and then stack one by one, one by one. So that says you can clearly say, for in this example, up to this much of thing, there is no, what we say, the additional cost. Additional, there might be the cost on the investment on the upfront, but if we talk about the life cycle cost, then the energy saving is surpassing your cost of the investment. Then on the later part, here are the higher cost option. So one can choose a prioritization of your option. So definitely I'll not start from here, I'll start from always from the lower side, no regret option. There are application, and I'll say that is more, these are a policy tool. Whether it is from the government policy or a policy at a firm level at the leadership, where what we call the resources are limited. You have fund is not available in the huge amount, and that is always case with the developing country. So you would like to have a prioritization based on that. It's a comparability, since these are plotted in the sequentially and also the volume, so one can see what is the potential and what is the associated cost with that. Very good for the information, investment decision. Also, one can use this for the fixing the carbon price. Of course, you would like to have a carbon price lesser than the your cost of, carbon credit cost higher than your cost of mitigation. Then only it makes trading sense, if you don't have an obligation. If you have obligation, then that is. But these are used. As I said, these are used both bottom-up way, like this is done in this particular exercise which is much useful at the firm level analysis, and these are also done at the broad modeling level where you club together the certain option and go sequentially. Of course, there are limitation and challenge with this MAC tool, and before implementing that, one should take cognizance of these things. First thing, of course, whenever we talk about these kind of analysis and in the developing country, data accuracy and availability is always remain challenge. But here in case, since I understand a lot of stakeholders are from the industry, they know about what are the measures and they have their suppliers, EPC contractors, so they have very good idea about the cost of that. Other thing we talk about, there are what we call that co-benefit, which are ancillary benefit or co-cost, which are not direct but indirect. So most oftenly these co-benefits are not internalized with this, or co-costs are not internalized with this. However, now globally research people are talking about these things and also internalizing these co-benefit and co-cost into the these marginal abatement cost. Of course, quantifying these co-benefit, particularly in terms of monetary, is very difficult, and these are very location and situation specific. A co-benefit we talk about in terms of the air pollutant reduction, so that has implication on health and mortality. There might be some policy regulatory consideration which may alter your cost. Whether there are enforcement for, say, the portfolio standard or compulsory mandate of the using green hydrogen. So these things cannot be reflected in the MAC curve. Behavioral response. In the industry, it's good that we operate mostly on the least cost manner. We do these appraisal kind of things. But say the issue related to personal choices, transport or residential sector, where behavior is very important, so it does not capture that issue. Also, there are interdependence. That's what, and it does not take into the interdependence. Maybe there are sequential option. Option B can be implemented only the option A. And if here in the map curve, if option A is least lower cost, it need to be plotted. So these kind of things one need to say. You broad map. Also, what I said is it gives at the leadership level broad mapping, which are the candidate idea. But whenever you imply these things, always do your another project appraisal criteria. Financial analysis, that's what we say usually, even in the financial analysis, not rely on one indicator, whether it is net present value or IRR or discounted payback period. So it's a good snapshot policy tool. You identify, but before implementation, do your regular project appraisal criteria where you have expertise and well confidence, and do these things in both in conjunction. So with this, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Atul Kumar. So you highlighted the importance and the concept and what kind of benefits it can help policymakers and corporates. Now, to know further about MSCC toolkit, let me invite Mr. Ayushra Sinha, young professional. As we are running late, we request all the speakers to limit by 8 to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Respected Honorable Chair DGB, Co-Chair JS Ministry of Steel, and the panelists and everyone present in this August Hall. I, on behalf of Ministry of Steel, would take you through the MSCC toolkit that we have created under the guidance of Secretary Steel. So MACs have played an increasingly important role in climate change mitigation and pollution control. In environmental economics field, MACs are defined necessary cost to pay per additional unit of emission reduction. Since economics is the social science which deals with scarce resources, thus MACs allocate scarce resources at national, sectoral, enterprise level to choose amongst the different levers, pathways, or technologies available for mitigating environmental emissions. This aids decision makers at various levels to monitor cost of transition. So this is an illustrative MAC shown on the screen. The positive y-axis shows the cost per ton of CO2 abated, whereas the negative y-axis depicts projects which have negative abatement year cost or resulting monetary savings with emission reduction. The x-axis shows the quantum of emission saved. So why is this tool important for the industry and the academia and everybody over here? Is using this tool, one can quantify, rank, and visualize GHG reducing projects and enable the organization to make informed, data-driven decisions while choosing projects. Also, one typically starts implementing projects from left to right, because the projects on the left yield savings. However, they may be smaller in the quantum of emission reduction. So depending upon your organizational choices, whether cost is crucial for you or the quantum, you choose these projects implementing from left to right. So a brief about Ministry of Steel's MACC toolkit. The MOS toolkit is a simple customized Excel-based tool available freely on the ministry's website. This toolkit enables stakeholders to model organization-specific cost curves. It gives you a page where you navigate which projects to choose, what time frame to look at, and how does your cost and your emission potential looks in a few years' time. Usually, we've kept a 5-year time frame. You have templates to create new projects, as many as you want, plan and monitor their sustainability journey. The toolkit also includes a repository of sustainability projects received from the steel companies. And once the toolkit is formed up, and with your feedback and the suggestions given by the industry and the stakeholders, it may be transformed to a cloud-based digital product. So simple, 4 steps to use this MAC curve. Step 1 is defining the MAC coverage or the scope of the MAC. It's very simple things: key assumptions, years, project selection, which is pretty basic in nature. Then we come to the customization of our projects. So we'll be needing now the exact project data of what kind of project are we envisaging to do, and what kind of fuels and etc. would be reduced, and what kind of waste would be reduced. I'll take you through the tool once we're done with the presentation. Now we verify our assumptions. There's a driver kit where there's a driver sheet in the tool where more than 30 fuels, 70 raw materials, 42 waste reduction techniques, electricity emission factors across states and India, and transportation measures have been given. You can choose the emission factors over here. We've based out of IPCC recommendations. You can choose your prices over there, and this can be changed and modified and customized as you wish. The most important thing while using this tool would be that the hard-coded cells are the gray cells. You do not touch them. The inputs are given in the yellow cells, and the green are the calculated cells, which gives you calculations. This is a typical Mac tool, how you use it. So I'd like to emphasize on a couple of things over here. So the starting point is a discount rate, as you can see over here. The discount rate is a country or an organizational specific discount rate depending upon the financial condition of that country or that company. Similarly, we have added a bar of carbon price. A horizontal line would be there on the MAC curves when you see. Why the carbon price? The carbon price tells us about a couple of things. First thing is, if we take the local carbon price, if it exists, or the international carbon price, it gives us the technology absorption level and you compare how technologically efficient your economy is. Similarly, it suffers from 2 drawbacks. One is it is dynamic in nature. It changes with time and does not stay stagnant. So it enables you to take decision temporally. Secondly, the carbon price is chosen. If your project is below the carbon price, economics will like to make the efficient use of the resources. So if it is below the carbon price, you implement it. If it is above the carbon price, you buy offsets. But however, this is not the right way, because we have to take care of our geographies as well. The other parts are you can choose which projects to choose and what time frames to see over here. Next is a typical project overview. You'll have in the tool, you'll have a variety of projects to choose from. If you wish to add a new tool, you start with add new project, you add its name, description, pretty simple, basic in nature. Now comes the part where you put your inputs over here. The abatement potentials and the green parts in abatement potentials and direct emissions reduction are calculated parts. Now we come down to the levers that your technology or your pathway recommends. So as I've mentioned, you first choose what kind of fuel your project would lead reduction into. For example, if you decide to increase the PCI rate, your coke rate will reduce. So over here, as soon as you start using coke, it will automatically fetch the emission factor from the drivers itself, the cost associated as well, and it will give you, it will ask you how much is the reduction of coke, and depending on that, it will calculate. You'll have options to choose. For example, some projects may would require a reduction in raw material consumption. Some would lead to reduction in waste and water, and some in transportation changes. So all of them have their emission factors associated in it. So now comes the marginal abatement cost. Marginal abatement cost is the net present value of abatement total cost upon divided by the abatement volume. So the abatement total cost is the total capex plus opex minus savings, and if your project makes another revenue, it generates a new revenue chain, then that is also subtracted. So OPEX savings, it's a very simple sheet that we have created over here. Everything is automatically calculated, but if some of the things cannot be calculated within the scope of the tools or the drivers provided, you have an additional option to put it over here. So it's 100% customizable for all your things. The total capex part over here. So the capex is usually company takes different kind of decisions. How much do you put upfront? How much do you finance, and etc. It's customizable. Select your discount rates, your interest rates, your tenure, and everything gets calculated in the annualized capex over here. So this is the drivers part where we have given an indicative list. You can add new raw materials, fuels, you can define their emission factors. If you have a different geography, you can take your own emission factors and your own prices for your own enterprises. Now this is a typical view of MAC. Some of the projects which have been provided in the Ministry of Steel's MAC tool are provided over here. As you can see, some of them comes with a negative abatement cost, which means that by implementing these projects, you'll save money and save the environment also. I've already mentioned the x-axis is the potential of every technology or every project to reduce the GHG emissions, and the y-axis is the cost that you pay for that transition. It's a simple QR. You can go on the Ministry of Steel website and download, or you can scan this QR and get this tool. Thank you so much. If Sir permits, I can just show one view of the tool so that people can get a... Sir. So this is a driver sheet which I was mentioning about. So this is a project, this is a driver side I was mentioning. So all kind of fuels which are being used currently in the steel industry have been mentioned over here. The EFs have the emission factors which are provided by IPCC and which is required for all kinds of emission accounting, be it WSA, UK DEFRA, or whatever you wish to, you'll find the emission factors from IPCC base. Or if your organization has a different boundary, you can change it over here. Price would always be your organization or your sector's thing to add, and that can be customized, added. If you want to add new, you can add new tools and modify them. Similarly for raw materials and transportations. Can we go to the view of a project? Yeah. So as I was mentioning over here, the fuels are mentioned. Can you please show the drop-down menu for fuels? You can select any one of the fuels from the, yeah. Yeah. The drop-down menu opens, you choose, and the values would be self-generated. You just have to push in the values that your project would reduce by what quantum and what values. Similarly, emission factors are provided for different states and the country as a whole. So with this, I end my presentation, and I ask all the stakeholders to use this tool, give us feedback, help improve, and also share some of their projects data so that they can be shared with the country as a whole for making the green transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ayush, for elaborating this wonderful tool. I hope that most of the project being implemented by corporates and businesses can make use of such tool and decide about their technology, etc. So I understand, I think there are many technologies which can come in the negative part, which should be in fact straight adopted by the steel sector. And in this regard, I think energy efficiency offers some of the best levers here. So let me invite Mr. Sarkar for giving the technologies. As requested, kindly keep your focus on the key areas and within the 10 minutes. Thank you. Over to you.
Chairman sir, co-chair, my fellow speakers and all the dignitaries, good morning. Let me admit at the beginning, I am threatened and panicked. Panicked because I have to describe Mausi before mother, and I have to talk about leverages to the operators of leverage of the levers of the steel plant. So you can understand my condition. But nevertheless, let me try. I am starting with Steve Jobs. You may be wondering what computer has to do or Steve Jobs has to do with the steel plant. But believe me, born and brought up in the steel plant, that once I started my career in a steel plant, ended with the steel plant, and today with the BE, let me tell you, only Steve Jobs can save the steel industry. Some innovation is required for decarbonization, and decarbonization is the only way to survive the steel plant. So what are the technologies of the steel plant? Let me tell you, in BE, we are not silent so far. We have started it in 2004 when we started the PAT, and under the PAT scheme, we have got lot of benefits. But those benefits are, let me explain you, are the low-hanging fruits. All the steel plants has catched them. But there are certain pluckable, high-hanging fruits also that needs to be plucked immediately and then go for decarbonization. What are they? Let me explain. But before that I explain, I think this is a particular slide I need to explain to you, that is the CO2. I am very sorry whether it is a marginal cost of abatement or the propensity curve. Fact is that steel plant has to adopt carbon reduction. Without reducing the carbon, they cannot survive. Prime Minister himself has said net zero by 2070. BE has said we will stick other to that. Steel plants has agreed. So we don't have any option but to stick to it. And if we have to stick to it, I think one of the biggest point is that we must know what is our carbon emission, CO2 emission from the steel plant. And working in the steel plant and working still in this fraternity, let me tell you, no steel plant is having a proper calculation of the CO2 emission from their unit. Very simple fact of the BE presentation of the PAT, very first presentation was that PAT is a get-to-get concept. Considering that get-to-get concept, if you take all the fossil fuels that is coming to it, quantity of it and convert it to CO2 and divide by the crude steel production, you get the CO2. No need of going into the scope for European Commission, IPSS, and rather American GSS is one of the most simplest form of calculating the CO2. And you will find that your CO2 figures are changing, and you will find many other options to reduce the carbon dioxide once you know your real CO2 value. I'll stop at here for CO2 simply because the fact is, it is you who has to really decide about it, that what is your CO2 value and what you should do, how you can cut down your losses and how you can improve your energy efficiency. I'll not go into all the slides. Boss has already instructed to finish it within 15 minutes, so I'll remain. But this is one of the points I wanted to highlight, that while the world is talking about 2100 to 2400, we are in India is talking about 2465 to 2826. All other figures below 2400 is all bullshit. They are not correct figures. I can prove those units, those who are claiming I am doing this, that they are not doing it. Sorry to say that, because I have worked all these steel plants who are claiming very high, very low CO2 emission. but you must calculate your CO2 emission and try to find out. See, one of the CO2 reduction tool is your energy efficiency improvement. And by improving energy efficiency, if the world can go to 5.8, and if you reach 5.8, you can substantially reduce it. And what are the energy efficiency reductions? Right from iron ore, beneficiate the iron ore, that gives you an energy efficiency. Beneficiate the coal, reduce the ash, that gives you an energy efficiency benefit. Uniform quality of raw material. When I started my career in 2018 in the steel plant, nobody heard of blending and bedding and blending. Today, all the steel plants are going for bedding and blending. Be it Tata Steel, JSW, or other government steel plants or ArcelorMittal. ArcelorMittal. Why? Because blending and blending gives an uniformity that helps in reduction of the total factor of the CO2, energy efficiency, and also quality improvement and productivity improvement. And all three are directly related to your CO2 reduction. Uniform fuel CV. We talk about uniform fuel CV, but we never consider uniform fuel CV. Unfortunately, most probably the leaders of the industry and the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Steel is here. They must look into the quality, that how to make the uniform CV of the fuel that we use. Today I get a coal from one mines, tomorrow I get a coal from another mines. Day after tomorrow I bring it from Indonesia, and another day I bring it from Australia. Really it is not correct. We should get uniform quality of steel. Go to Kobe steel plant of Japan, they also buy from all the plants, but they blend it to make it uniform CV, and that gives them a tremendous advantage. Kobe is one of the lowest specific energy consuming plant in the world. Control moisture. See, one of the big fashion in India is that we go for, all the steel plants are going for stamp charging, and that there you need to add 10% moisture. But actually you go to the steel plant, nobody uses less than 11%, 10.5%, 12% moisture. And what is the impact on the energy consumption? One should calculate and then really control the moisture. Waste heat recovery units. You will be saying that, oh, all these things are known to us. But what I am going to tell you is what is not known to you. Waste heat recovery in intercooler. Our yield is 35%, calculated 35% less than the world average. Why? That why you also know, I also know, many a times we select a vendor, many a times we select a thing that is not matching, and it is coming down, efficiency coming down. We have to be very clear about it. Coke dry quenching. The best part is now it has been mandated that anybody putting up a coke ovens has to go for a coke dry quenching. And in that coke dry quenching, when you are looking at the coke dry quenching steam generation and power generation, you will find that India is much lesser than the world average. Why? TRT, blast furnace TRT. Blast furnace TRT for a 4000 cubic meter blast furnace should produce about 15 megawatt of power. In India, nobody produces more than 9 megawatt of power. Ask them, give them the example, they have got many reasons, but they don't have the reason how they don't have the thing how they can do. Most probably operating discipline and some amount of the strictness of the operation will bring power generation much higher. At least improve from 9 megawatt to 12, 13 megawatt, and that I have seen in my own eyes by experimenting. Steel melting shop, oxygen lancing, this is a very peculiar thing. One of my boss in the steel plant told me, go to Japan, stay there for 6 weeks and find out why Japan operates with 45 meter cube, why India is operating with 54 meter cube. I want to bring it down. And when I went there I found that in Japan they are not doing anything great. Simply they have an operating discipline. If the operator is taking beyond 45 meter cube of oxygen for a particular grade of steel to be produced, he is immediately questioned that give a reason why you consumed. And if he cannot give a satisfactory reason, immediately he is taken out of the operation. And it is threatened that the oxygen will be cut off. In fact, some of the Japanese steel plant has already implemented, like Nippon Steel and JFE Steel, where 45 meter cube consumption per ton of hot metal with the based on the hot metal charge, they will cut off. Whatever grade is coming, it is your problem. You will think that it is dictatorship. No, the operator knows that at 45 cubic meter I will be cut off from oxygen. They do all the things and they really produce the quality steel also. So these are the strict discipline has to be brought in. Steel melting, converter gas waste heat recovery, LD shop waste heat recovery. We all recover the LD shop gas as a fuel. How many of us know that LD gas recovery is also possible? Sorry, how many of everybody knows? How many of us knows where in India we do it? There is only one steel plant that has got a converter gas recovery boilers and that produce power. All other steel plants are not going for it. Reason you know, it's very maintenance oriented. Who will do the maintenance? What does it mean?
2 minutes left.
2 minutes. Okay, I'll finish in 2 minutes. Don't worry. 2 minutes, I thought that it is a noodle is coming to me. Anyway, you took 1 minute, so I'll speak 1 more minute more. And I talked about low and uniform CV fuel and the regenerative burners. This is another technology, VAM chiller, vapor absorption machine. You know, only in India, only one steel plant has got a vapor absorption machine, and this is a beautiful machine where from waste heat of the mills, 300 degrees centigrade temperature of the waste gas is converted into cold, and that cold is sufficient to cool the transformer generator room of the steel plant, that particular mill. One mill in India is operating, I am not naming any one of them because all they are sitting here, they will take the advantage. So, only one plant. Incidentally, I worked in that plant and I have installed it. So, fact is that others can do it. And that is an indigenous technology. Nobody wants to do it. Why should I do it? Bhai, hamara to steel profit karta hi hai. That is the attitude. So, this is what, I have mentioned it at JSW Vijayanagar has done it. Sorry. Another big thing, why steel plant don't think about it, I really don't know. Steel plant use about 35% of the energy as an electrical power. That 35%, if it becomes green power, they save CO2 by almost 20%. Why they are not doing it? They are cash rich. Each of them makes 5,000, 6,000 crore profit. They can, and they are not situated in Delhi, Bombay, Madras or metropolitan cities like Calcutta. They are in far off places where lot of land is available. They can always put the green power plant and convert the power, route the power to the steel plant and produce steel. Why they are not doing? Now I am coming to the most favored subject, energy efficiency levers. You know, we are all talking about hydrogen. Hydrogen is the miracle thing for the steel plants to reduce thing. Sorry, 1 more minute left. Scarcity of I'll not go into the talk of the thing, but I must tell you what is hydrogen iron making. That hybrid. Hybrid is, what is it? Basically, it has been developed in SAB and LCAB laboratory, and it has proved its point. But they have already proved it that hydrogen in blast furnace can be injected up to 1000 meter cube per hour theoretically. They have gone up to 150 meter cube in practical. In our country, Tata Steel has done only 5 meter cube. If I look for the Tata Steel speaker, he will certainly explain it most probably. Only 5 meter cube. But no consortium effort to increase it to 10, 20, 15. Why should Tata Steel alone do it? All steel plants should join hand together, pick up a furnace which is going for revamping, and they should try to increase. And that will be the benefit. There is already a proven technology of using natural gas which can go up to 280 meter cube per ton of steel, and which is done by the Sylvester Steel in Russia. The calculation is all available. Why not we do this experimentation? Then coming to another HDRI. What we are talking about HDRI, first we have to produce pellet. for HDRI, hydrogen DRI. Somebody was explaining, Secretary Sir was telling. First, you have to produce pellet. That pellet is produced from, if you are producing from the in-plant gases, it is carbon dioxide emitting. So, pellet has to be produced by biofuel. There is a technology, biofuel. World people are doing this biofuel, and even in Delhi, one biofuel plant is coming. Yesterday I was going through, which will produce 30 tons of biofuel. I don't know why it is coming in Delhi. It should have come to some of the nearby steel plants. This is one of the factors. They have to produce biofuel. They have to produce hydrogen. Instead of using coking coal, when they will use hydrogen, they have to produce green hydrogen. And green hydrogen only will give you green decarbonization. No other hydrogen will give. Then you have to go for direct reduction. That means you have to go for either electric arc furnace or any other or any other furnace, regenerative furnace like that. There again you have to use green power. So it is not only hydrogen, it is also many other factors which will finally make it green hydrogen. I only urge to all of you that please think holistically and think about a thing. H2 in blast furnace, I was doing little bit of research in my own way through internet. I am not a researcher. I was doing little bit of research and I found that, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of things, but hydrogen is not a very unknown subject in blast furnace. People have tried with natural gas, which has got 53% of blast furnace. I asked one blast furnace operator who is a very good friend of mine and a very famous blast furnace operator. I asked him, यार अगर मैं nitrogen मिला दूंगा hydrogen के साथ करके 52% कर दोगे तो can you inject it into the blast furnace? He says yes, but who will give me the hydrogen? That is why you are not thinking about it. So these are the bottlenecks that is working with the steel plant people. I think that is why I am always repeating on the holistic approach. I will not go into HDRI, which I have explained already. So finally, coming to the conclusion, I can only say these slides you can always read, but I can only say most probably Tagore, the world poet, has described the pathetic condition of the Indian steel industry, because I belong to that fraternity. All my life I worked there. In a small poem, what we want, we really don't know. And what we get, we don't want it. He said in Bengali, Jaha chai taha bhul kore chai, jaha pai taha chai na. And that is exactly what is happening about steel industry. We are looking for hydrogen. We don't need hydrogen unless we have got all other technology. We must first go to the green power. So my brethren, I request you, stop wishing that technology will come from abroad. Here I must mention one small anecdote. In COP21, I was discussing with a researcher, because COP21 was the only place where COP given some Japan and America some research on the steel industry. And when I asked the US steel researcher man that what you are doing, he says, look, we are working on an electrolysis of metal, iron ore. I said, then divulge it. Well, why? That will be our technological leverage to sell to all of you. Because we don't want to produce steel, it is a dirty thing. We will only produce the technology. And the entire world today is working, producing the technology, mastering the technology, and we have got no other way but to master the technology. Thank you for crossing 2 minutes more.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkar. Let me invite now from GT, Mr. Nandgopal. As we are planning to conclude this session by 12:30, I request you to be brief and only stick to your own points. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Nandgopal.
Thank you, Chairperson, Co-Chair, respected speakers and fellow participants. If I can have the slides up. Thank you. Good afternoon, sharp 12 o'clock. I thought I would be done in the morning. You heard a lot about macros, technologies, and you also heard from chairpersons earlier in this inaugural session that financing is a key aspect. You need a lot of finance, but that quantum is not defined yet. There are certain levers which help you generate excess revenue by looking at decarbonization. I'm here to speak about the carbon markets in general and what India's carbon market is doing. Now, carbon market gives you a kind of a tool which puts a money value to the GHG emissions which you're reducing from your emissions. And essentially what it does is that it opens avenues to look for new technologies which you otherwise wouldn't have looked because of the cost competitiveness. You can mobilize certain finance. It helps you leverage international collaborations if you're looking at say Article 6 of Paris Agreement, and ultimately what it's helping is your business to reduce your footprint and also the country to meet its NDC targets and things like that. Now, before I get to India's carbon market, I just want to quickly speak about carbon pricing in general, because it was touched upon as internal carbon price and the various methods. So carbon pricing is an instrument which is essentially like those who are polluting, they should pay for that pollution. And as Professor Atul spoke, carbon pricing is used for air pollutions. It has been used as a carbon cess in India previously, like for coal there was a cess. So anything which is associated with emissions and as a tax can be bracketed as carbon tax. Now you have certain programs or interventions where the ultimate goal is to reduce carbon. They are kind of crediting mechanisms, which is another type of carbon pricing. Then you have the carbon markets, which we are discussing, like the emission trading scheme is the third type. There's certain result-based projects like you're lighting 1 billion lives, which was more focused on providing lighting. You have access to clean energy or clean cooking, but there one of the co-benefits becomes GHG reduction, right? So there you have certain carbon pricing getting involved. And finally, you have the internal carbon pricing, which as previous speaker said, it relies on the principle of the marginal abatement cost curve. You look at your potential projects and what you want to implement which are not getting financed because let's say the paybacks are excess of 3 years or capital intensive, then you do a MAC analysis of all your projects and the cumulatively you arrive at internal carbon price. And this internal carbon price, I tell you, has been adopted by, as per the Climate Disclosure Project, close to 60 corporates in India have adopted or communicated their internal carbon price. We have worked with quite a few of them. Now, having established that there are different types of carbon pricing instruments which are there, one of them is the emission trading, and which is carbon markets. It can again be looked at from a compliance perspective and also from a voluntary perspective. From the compliance perspective, it is the emission trading schemes. The well-recognized and running schemes are the European Union's emission trading scheme. You also have Korea and China ETS. What you see on the screen there is what the present week's prevailing carbon trading numbers per ton of CO2. EU ETS, it's around $75. Korea and China around $6 and $10.5 each. And these are mandatory mechanisms where you would have governments coming in and mandating certain entities to achieve these targets. And beyond these are the voluntary ones. You can't mandate everyone. There are many sectors of economy which would take voluntary actions through their commitment to climate and sustainability, which would require certain mechanisms, right? Those are the offset mechanisms. And here in the good old days, about a decade ago, you had the clean development mechanism, which ran very well. Now you have mechanisms which are run by platforms like VCS and Gold Standard. In fact, Article 6.4 will also have international collaborations for trading voluntarily carbon credits. Now, as we said, the base that what markets is, how it's related to pricing. Let's look at India's carbon market, which is being developed, will soon be launched, will be applicable soon under the guidance of DGBE. It was notified on 28th of June last year under the Energy Conservation Act. A slight amendment was done to include offsets in December last year. The notification deals with what's the actual implementation framework, who are the stakeholders involved, what are their roles in development and functioning of this carbon credit trading scheme. It also speaks of setting up, which is set up now, the National Steering Committee, which would be governing and overseeing the functioning of the Indian carbon market. Now, if you have to look at how this would function, Bureau of Energy Efficiency would act as the administrator, the custodian of the Indian carbon market, the carbon credit trading scheme. You would have registered entities which would be the obligated entities which would be under compliance, and the all other non-obligated entities who could trade through the offset scheme. And as with the PAT scheme, you have accredited energy audit firms, you will have accredited carbon verifiers who would be verifying your carbon reduction projects and your carbon inventories. There will be a technical committee who will be looking after the affairs. You will have CERC working as the regulator, grid controller of India would be the registry where all the carbon credits would be registered and traded off. You would have power exchanges which would act as the trading platforms. So you would have a compliance market, which I'll speak in a minute, and you will also have an offset market. The offset market will be a voluntary in nature. Now, if you look at how this compliance market would work, it would work fairly similar to the PAT scheme, which most of the steel units have been part of. The PAT scheme, you get a baseline specific energy consumption in terms of TOE per ton, normalized production. Here you would get a baseline specific emissions intensity, which would be, let's say, tons of CO2 per ton of normalized product. In this example which you see here, the first case is of an entity, let's say its baseline emission intensity is 2.5 tons of CO2. And it produces 100,000 tons, just for ease of calculation. And through the CCTS scheme, you get a target of, say, 2.2 tons at the end of the obligation period. And you take certain actions, this entity A takes certain actions, brings down the emissions to, say, below that 2. Whatever is the additional reduction which they were not obligated to, but they have done it, that would be awarded to them as carbon credits, which can be traded in the market. Whereas on the right, if you see, you have a scenario where there is an entity with similar kind of dynamics but fell short. They would have to purchase these credits from the market. Now, if you remember from the previous slide, the trading in China is around $10. If you look at this example, 20,000 tons of CO2 with at $10 would mean $200,000. Looks very small, right? But the minute you compare it with the rates of EU ETS, it's almost more than $1 million which you'll have to shell out in buying those credits. Rather, you would have invested them in decarbonizing yourself. So the price would get determined by market on its own. So if you look at the mechanism, it would be a market-driven mechanism where the demand and supply will drive the price, and how the prices will be realized. Will it be closer to China or Korea, or would it be closer to EU? Only time will tell us. But what we know is that we'll have to decarbonize sooner. And if you see who would be the obligated entity, so we have something called designated consumers now, those large steel industries. And these large steel industries would slowly transition from being part of PAT to being part of carbon credit trading scheme. BE till date has notified around 8 PAT cycles, and up to PAT cycle 5 have been concluded, including the monitoring and verification. What's going to happen with this future PAT cycle is that as the PAT cycle ends, they transition to carbon credits trading scheme. So the designated entities would become obligated entities by next financial year. And if you see, the numbers of designated entities are given. Many of those are steel industries. They would transition into that. Now, if I have to speak quickly about steel particularly, if you see, the carbon market is going to come. You're going to get targets. How stringent those targets, initially we can't say, but with time they will get stringent because we have 2070 net zero targets. Most of the European steel industry has taken 2045 as their net zero year. So which means their technologies, which are mostly under development, are not yet commercialized. Like we spoke of hybrid, there was electrolysis, molten oxide electrolysis, electrowinning. These are all technology readiness level 5 or 6, which have been proven but not commercialized yet. They will get commercialized soon, but we can't wait until 2040 to put those in, right? Because most of the steel plants, once they come in, they have a life cycle of in excess of 30, 40 years. And you can't invest in a technology. Let's say if you are planning for 2030 investment, you can't look at a conventional technology and invest in that, because then you can't be net zero by 2070 because your conventional plant is running. So you'll have to look, if not today, by 2030 at new technologies. So for that, I close by quickly speaking about a carbon management hierarchy. What is important is that presently many industries take ad hoc decisions on reducing their carbon footprint. MAC is a tool which would help you, but you could categorize your investments in where you get the maximum amount of saving. First is to rethink of the process, those process optimization solutions which the previous speaker was mentioning. Those are the first things to do, because if you bring down your overall gigacal per ton requirement, then your footprint is automatically coming down. Next step is to minimize, that is, you improve your demand side energy efficiencies. As chairman pointed out multiple times, these have low or negative marginal abatement cost. There's nothing stopping you. You don't even need the carbon credit benefits. Those are already available to you. And then you look at those replacement options of fuel switch, renewables, and hydrogen and other options if necessary. And finally, as you go beyond 2035, you'll also have to look at offsets, which are either nature-based or technology-based, which could be traded under the offset schemes of the carbon credit trading scheme. The schemes documents are out. You can find all the details at Bureau of Energy Efficiency's website. And we hope that we will have a very successful carbon credit trading program starting next financial year. Thank you very much for inviting.
Sir, I will ask now Shri Harsh from Centra World to give a presentation on AI-based monitoring.
Thank you. Shri Ashwini Kumar, Economic Advisor, Ministry of Steel. Srimati Sukriti Lekhi, Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Steel. Shri Ajay Bhakre, DGBE. Shri Sanjay Roy, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Steel. Fellow panelists and Chief Sustainability Officers from leading steel companies in India. I think together in this room we have 65% of India's steel production in this room. And talking on the topic of sustainability. Members of the audience, those who are in person and those who are joining offline as well. I'm here to talk about the use of AI in CO2 measurement systems. Now, just quick recap of numbers, right? We know we need to control temperature growth, right? We cannot have it exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade. At the same time, steel forms about 12% of India's greenhouse gas emissions. So definitely in focus. We heard the number of 2.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel, which is India's average for crude steel CO2 intensity, whereas the global average is 1.9. We need to bring this down. I think that's what we're here to talk about. But how do we even get started? There are numerous questions which come up, right? Which methodologies to use? There are tons of them around. There's Greenhouse Gas Protocol, World Steel, CBAM, many methodologies out there. What are the use cases? It cannot just be for compliance. We need to actually figure out monetizable use cases over here. Scope 3 is always sort of throws a spanner in the works. There are, AI and blockchain. How is that going to work? We're talking about a whole lot of data. Some of that data going from producers to suppliers. How is all of that going to happen? So there's a lot of questions which come up from steel producers, and typically what we say is, the first step is to actually start measuring your CO2 emissions, because what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. And we say that there are 3 pillars of that. Pillar number 1 is around recognized methodologies. We need to be very clear around which methodologies are supposed to be used for which purpose. What are your customers demanding? What are the regulators demanding? What are customs demanding? Second is reliable data. We are sitting in a world where a lot of data is actually being collected today. But is this data reliable? Is it going through validation checks? We need to ensure all of that. And I think we are way past the point where we can run on simple tools. We actually need more complex and calculative engines which can actually help us process a lot of this data together. Now, to do all of this, right, we've identified 4 steps which are needed to measure your CO2 emissions properly and to set up the tracking systems for it. Step number 1 is around data gathering. Now, there are, this is a very, very important step because all the calculations that we do, all the reporting that we do in steel CO2 emissions, they're all calculation based. So the first step is around creating your data maps. This is where you need to look at what data you need, what is the location, is it sitting in your ERP systems, is it sitting on plant systems, what is the accuracy of that data, do we have confidence in that, and also is the frequency good enough for us. The next step is you don't want to spend a lot of manual effort in gathering this data. So can we integrate with an ERP system like an SAP or something else to actually get all of this data? And also, it's not just about scope 1 and scope 2, it's also about scope 3. This is where your suppliers are really coming in. How do you bring them into the fold so that they start supplying data to you, right? So it's a lot about gathering data, building up that system for interconnection. Secondly, it's around the calculation engines itself, where you come out and calculate your emissions. The first one is around validation checks. I briefly mentioned that we have a lot of data which is flowing in, but how accurate is that? Now, there are various validation checks that you can put in. Simple things like if you're getting electricity consumption, can you match it against your electricity bill? Right? There are now AI engines, which are natural language processing based engines, which can actually do these checks. The data that you're getting from your suppliers, can you validate them? Right? There are other ways in which now we're actually exploring a few blockchain solutions where you can, along your entire supply chain, let's say you're going from a mine to a primary producer to let's say a foundry and then finally to an automotive player. You can put your emissions numbers of each particular part into a block on the blockchain, so that you have 4 independent blocks of emissions data which is there, which cannot be disputed, right? It enhances trust. And then there are other engines that we can use. A lot of the report generation can actually be done using AI. And finally, certification of results, right? We all need to certify our calculators, we all need to certify our engines. How are we going to do that? What is the use of AI in all of this? I'm just going to go through a couple of them in detail, very mindful of the 10-minute limit. So the first one that we will start with is something called a carbon wallet. Excuse the text, but I'll talk you through it. Now, what happens is that, there may be about 5-10% of your customers of steel plants who may say that I want CO2 emissions at, let's say, 1 ton of CO2 per ton of steel, whereas the company is producing it at about, let's say, 2.5. Now, it doesn't make sense to go out and decarbonize your whole plant and make so much of capex investment for that 10% of your customers. Now, how do we actually do this? Right? That's where the whole carbon bank logic comes. Now, what we do is that, if you just see the flow, it starts with a customer who comes and says that I need I need a product which has CO2 emissions of let's say, one ton of CO2 per ton of steel. The sales team actually goes out and checks this in the carbon accounting software to see what CO2 footprint range we are currently operating in, and thereby identifies a certain shortfall and says we are currently operating at 2.5, so we have a shortfall of 1.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel. At the same time, at the back end, we are uploading carbon credits into a carbon wallet. They can also come as renewable energy certificates and other forms. As our own carbon credit program gets solidified, this will all come in over there. So all of this is available in a carbon wallet. Imagine your Paytm or one of these mobile wallets, right? You have all of this, and when the product gets produced and it is being shipped, that's when you attach the carbon credits to that particular order, right? Thereby, what you've done is you've supplied a product to a customer meeting those carbon requirements on the robust basis of verifiable carbon credits, using elements of AI where you can verify all of this, and a lot of heat level calculations to get to an answer per customer order. Right? So this is one such example where a digitalized process end to end can actually help you save capex and meet customer needs. That's one. This is an interesting one. We get a lot of questions from more downstream players, right? Saying that I also need to show emissions of my suppliers. It is becoming a requirement in BRSR as well, and many other reporting standards. And here the idea is that you need to bring your suppliers on board. You need to dictate to them that this is the structure, this is the format of reporting. Many of them are smaller players. We deploy digital tools to suppliers so that they can actually do their reporting, bring it back. You need to verify that data. There is AI-led validation happening over there. You can actually gamify the whole experience for suppliers, right? You can say that 3 suppliers are supplying a certain product to me. their emissions are at A, B, C level. If you disclose that, they will know what level they are supposed to reach, so they become the preferred supplier. Right? And finally, you can set targets. If you have a yearly decarbonization target of, let's say, 7-8%, you can actually translate that back to your suppliers. But you need to bring them into the fold through a digital means. Quick thing around blockchain, right? So, simple value chain from mine to steel plant to end consumer in the scrapyard. What you do is that at each point, you create a block of data, right? Each of these points is called a node. Each transaction is essentially the product dispatch which is happening. You create a block of data per dispatch, where you're capturing the activity data, you're capturing the CO2 emissions, you're capturing a cryptographic sign authorizing that this data is true to the full extent. And this block of data goes into the public or a private blockchain. And as the product is moving through the entire value chain, a block of data keeps getting added. So at the end of it, you have disclosure from all the members of this value chain on what their CO2 emissions are, which cannot be erased, which cannot be disputed. Right? Instead of having very extensive certification standards and bodies, blockchain is an alternative to get everybody involved in the process. And finally, my last slide is over here, where most of the companies, steel companies over here, struggle with literally a billion compliances which are coming their way. I mean, there are numerous standards. I can see a few smiles in the audience around this topic, but there's so many standards which are coming out. We have teams of 3 to 5 people who are in each steel company who are actually just doing this. Now, we have identified that there are only 275 unique metrics which make up any ESG standard, any sustainability standard. So why can't we have a process where we track these 275 and report generation can be done automatically? Because after you have the numbers, it's all about putting in the English text, for which also you have generative AI to do that, right? So I'll leave you with this thought that we have to really think about all the processes that we are engaging in for sustainability in steel. Where are new technologies like AI and blockchain going to come up? And we will have to take a few bets. Blockchain is still a few years away. We will have to take a few early bets, but many of them are actually in front of us. I'm going to leave with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harsh. And so that's really an emerging area which perhaps will go a long way in managing such emission reductions and other aspects of decarbonization. So we have our last speaker, Director in NISST, Sri R.K. Paul. I'll invite him to discuss about CO2 abatement in the secondary steel sector. Over to you, Mr. Paul.
Yeah. My chair for the panel, Sri Abhay Bhakreji, DGBE. My co-chair, Sri Sanjay Roy, Dr. Sanjay Roy, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Steel, and my fellow panelists. And ladies and gentlemen in the hall today. So I actually am trying to represent the secondary steel sector, which is basically is little bit is a very broad sector with a lot of variability, I would say, because it starts with the coal-based DRI, then induction furnaces, and then you have the rolling mills and the re-rolling mills. Re-rolling mills are such a thing where you roll another rolled product, and apart from that, there are a lot of other smaller and other equipments which covers a lot of area. So in NIST, basically, we take our major activities are actually also a variety of area. We do research, we do give consultancy services, we do energy audits, and now we'll be also looking after the GHG emissions. And now going by the GHG emissions, many don't understand what is GHG basically. They confuse with with pollution. But GHG emission actually is the carbon dioxide and mainly methane, which basically contribute to the heating of our planet.
And the present level of CO2 in the atmosphere is about, I think, about little above 420 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere, which before the Industrial Revolution, it was about 280. And there was a mini ice age also in between, which occurred about 400 years ago. And that was because there was a fall in the population, as well as there was a lot of vegetation growing elsewhere in the planet. So this way, and now why we have reached to this level? And India may not be so much impacted as the areas which are near the Arctic and the Antarctic zone, because those areas, here we may be having a 0.5, 0.8, 1 degree rise. There it will rise maybe 6 or 7 degrees. And because of 7 degrees or 8 degrees rise, the permafrost regions are melting, and all the trapped methane gases are now coming out. You may be seeing a lot of burning in the permafrost region of Siberia and other regions. So these are cause of concern. And we have a huge livestock, the cattle population. India has the highest cattle population, and the methane emission is much more harsher, is a much more harsher GHG compared to CO2. So I will go to the next level, and these are the major pathways actually for the secondary steel sector to abate what we call the greenhouse gas emissions. One is the energy efficiency improvement, which I think Sarkarji has rightly evaluated and gave us the technologies there. And then we have to also bring in resource and material efficiency. And here I want to tell you one thing, that the present the sponge iron, coal-based sponge iron plants, many of the plants are using much more higher quantity of coal than they are required to do. Then you may ask why they are doing. I find that they think that the sponge iron production is the byproduct, whereas the electricity production is the major product. And then this extra coal, what is going in to produce the electricity, if you compare this particular generation of coal consumption per what you call kilowatt hour, you will find it is much higher than a supercritical thermal power plant. That means we are trying to generate electricity through a much more what you call non-productive way. So these are areas where we can means increase material efficiency, resource efficiency, and we can decrease wastage. And then another thing is the use of greener fuels like PNG, biomass, green hydrogen. PNG is available across the country, many places, but then the viability comes into the question. So whether they are able to compete with others or not. Then there are a lot of implementable low GHG technologies which can be used readily and effectively can be implemented. Then we also in the steel industry, we should sweat out our assets. That is the maximizing capacity utilization. Your blast furnace is giving 10,000 tons per day. We can try and improve its efficiency with better quality iron ore or beneficiated iron ore and good quality coal, and variability of the coal usage should come down. And then the most important thing is the training of personnel and the changing of the mindset. That is actually not happening. That we require to do. And these are the tentative implementable technologies for CO2 reduction. I have enumerated all the technologies, all the major areas of the secondary steel sector. That is the coal-based DRI. Many of the DRI units are not having waste heat recovery boilers. So we need to push them to implement that. And there are also issues where they are not able to put the waste heat recovery boiler because they are not getting the what you call the permission to do that. So that is something little bit awkward. So we need to look into that. And the cold drying, cold optimization, best practices, and the insulation of the kilns. This is another major area where we need to use a better quality of refractory so that the heat losses may be minimized. And the steel making area, there is a lot to do because in the induction furnaces, basically the energy consumption is much higher than an electric arc furnaces. Because one of the most important thing about the induction furnaces, because the capacities are not average capacities are 10 ton per heat, which is much below the normal viability level. So we need to look into that. And the rolling mills, the most important thing, the TMT producers can easily go for direct rolling. Most of the plants are not having the direct rolling facilities, who are having the melting unit. Many of them have already implemented, but it is yet to go across the board. And this is the potential we have calculated. And if you see the potential, it is a huge potential by only implementing these technologies. So, and if you see that 45% reduction with this particular, these figures are from the present level to 2030-31. So, I see that there is a huge potential, and we can easily go to 45% reduction by implementing these particular technologies without hydrogen. And this is our proposed action plan, what we want to do in the secondary steel sector. And basically, we need to, we should have some measurable data. Until unless we have measurable data, we cannot work and do implement newer technologies. And this is the major recent intervention which we have done across the secondary steel sector. We conducted, and we have got a lot of data now. And we are also in the process of implementing some low-hanging fruits or low-hanging technologies under the UNDP project. And within 2 or 3 months, we'll be doing, and I hope they will get benefited out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I think we are able to conclude by 12:30. I'm sure you may be having many questions, but we don't want to delay the next session now, and which was actually slated around 12:15. So let me thank all the panelists here. These carbon the marginal cost is going to be actually crucial in taking decisions for at least next 5 to 7 years. Because whatever technology you are going to decide, and once we implement, they will be locked for another 20-25 years. And I think the kind of transition we are expecting in next 2 decades, you need to select the technology very carefully, considering all aspects, and in these tools are going to help all of us. So let me thank again all the panelists, and over to Co-Chair if you want any remarks.
Thank you, sir, for sparing your time for coming for this session, sir. And we will all break for a short tea break where we can go ahead with the further discussions and the questions which we are leaving here, then that can be discussed over the cup of tea. So with this, I thank all of you to have kept patience for 2.5 hours to listen and to bear with us. So let us not be between us and the tea. Thank you everyone.
Thanks.
Can we have these presentations available? Excuse me.
Yes.
Can we have these presentations available?
Yes. Yeah, we will get it circulated. Email ID. Everyone has a mail ID. At the end of the session, we have the mail ID. We will send all the presentations to all the concerned, whoever registered.
We'll go into a shorter tea break because we are running a little behind schedule. So 15 minutes instead of 30. And just one
That was only 15 minutes earlier also. So we'll be back by say 12:45, 12:50 to be precise.
And chairs, with your permission, I'd like to acknowledge an error of omission. I forgot to introduce Harsh Chaudhary when we started our panel, CEO of Centra World. Thank you.